Ken Middleton was accused and then convicted of killing his then wife. Well, fast forward to 2005, and you got a judge that says, not so fast. And it's been a nearly 20-year fight for Cliff Middleton to try to get his father, Ken Middleton, out of prison right here in the Kansas City area. And Cliff is in our studios this morning on KCMO 95.7 FM. Cliff, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
Let's just go back to 1991. You're 20 years old. What's going on in your life? What's going on with the family when the sentencing comes down? Take us through that whole time 30-plus years ago, which many people listening right now are not going to remember this story.
Right, yeah. I was about to be 21 when this happened. My father was convicted in February of 91, and it was, tragic for the whole family. It just, I would have never believed my dad would have been in that position. He'd worked hard all his life. They had a great marriage. He wasn't, it never had been in trouble a day in his life.
Yeah. So fast forward then, he gets convicted. He's in prison. Did you believe from the get-go that this is something he had absolutely nothing to do with?
Oh, absolutely. My whole family has always supported my father. And, I will tell you that when he was convicted in 1991, the prosecution's theory of the case was that my father held my stepmother up against the wall and shot her from 8 inches away. And the defense attorney called no witnesses, no expert witnesses, put on no defense, and therefore my father was convicted. He had no defense put forward to the jury. So I never really blamed the jury for his conviction because they didn't see all the evidence. So your first round of appeals, you go right back in front of your trial judge to try to convince him you're wrongfully convicted. Well, our appellate attorney procedurally defaulted all of my dad's issues in a 3-page motion, and the judge never saw all the evidence that wasn't put forward, so she denied it. Well, at that point, she loses jurisdiction, and your appeal goes into the appellate process. So all through my father's appellate process, the courts never heard none of his issues of why he was wrongfully convicted. So they just procedurally barred them, never heard them. So then in 2004, Judge Messina, we had filed a motion to reopen my father's case back in front of her.
So this is 13 years after his original conviction of, allegedly killing your mother.
Exactly.
Wow.
So she reopened the case. And the prosecutors in Jackson County allowed that to take place. We had a 2-day evidentiary hearing, which is a mini trial that expert witnesses came in and testified. The former governor of Missouri came in and testified on my father's behalf that this was the worst case of constitutional violations he had witnessed in 41 years of practicing law, and he would have given my father a full pardon. Forensic experts, when they looked at the blood spatter and the gunshot residue, there was none on my father, and they said it was physically impossible for my father to have held her up against the wall and shot her from 8 inches away and not have any blood spatter or gunshot residue on him. Mm-hmm. And then the judge also saw that the police destroyed gunshot residue on my stepmother, which would have proved she accidentally fired the gun, which is exactly why Judge Messina overturned the conviction, because the jury never heard any of this evidence due to an ineffective attorney.
So this gets overturned by Judge Edith Messina in 2005.
Yes.
And basically what it's believed to have happened here is what? She was holding a pistol and accidentally fired it and hit herself?
The forensic experts, when they traced the trajectory of the bullet backwards, something that had never been done at trial because the defense attorney never did it, when they traced the trajectory of the bullet backwards, they determined that the gun was approximately 4'1" off the ground when it went off. Mm-hmm. And there was a dining room table right there and a wall right there where this happened at. And the forensics show that the gun either fell and hit the dining room chair that was right there and went off, striking her, or as she was trying to catch the gun, it went off and struck her. But the bullet, when it exited, it hit the wall and then went up and hit the ceiling and landed across the room. So it was basic mathematics where they traced the gun back. So
was your father home when this happened, by the way?
Yes, yeah, he was there. He called 911 5 times trying to get them there. So
and they're living in Blue Springs or Kansas City, Missouri?
Yes, they were living in Blue Springs at the time, and
yeah. So, all right. So Cliff Middleton's here. His father, Ken Middleton. This story has gotten national attention, by the way. ABC News and others have covered this. So now it gets overturned in 2005, but he's still sitting in prison today. There is a new law in Missouri that has passed here in the last couple of years, giving some renewed hope that you can get your father, Ken, out of prison after a 200-year sentence. What is that law? And what do people need to know about why you think that law should allow him to get out of prison?
Yes, he was sentenced to life without parole plus 200 years.
Okay,
so
wow.
Yes, but one thing to note there, after Judge Messina had her hearing in 2004, the prosecutors, the Jackson County prosecutors, offered my dad an Alford plea. Before she overturned his conviction now, they come to him with an Alford plea. With all appeal is exhausted, my father turned it down.
Which is?
Freedom. He would have walked out a free man then if he would have said he pled guilty to second-degree murder, basically. An Alford plea, you can get up and say you're innocent, but you're still pleading guilty. My father turned that down. The prosecutors then appealed on jurisdictional grounds that the judge didn't have jurisdiction. So the appeals court agreed. They never addressed that he was wrongfully convicted. They just agreed that she didn't have jurisdiction. Now, to get to your point in this new law, fast forward to 2021 in the Kevin Strickland case. When the new law come down, the new law gave our judge at that time, Judge Edith Messina, it gave the motion courts jurisdiction to correct wrongful convictions, which they said she didn't have back when they took our new trial away.
In 2005.
In 2005. So in 2021, now the courts have jurisdiction, but the prosecutor has to file the motion. Well, you're talking about the same prosecutors who offered him an Alford plea and he refused it, the same prosecutors who lost in front of the trial judge. They argued that he was correctly convicted, and they lost. So they tried to get him to take an Alford plea. He wouldn't do that. And now when they have the opportunity to have this case heard on the merits by conceding jurisdiction, Gene Peters Baker could have very easily filed a one-page motion conceding jurisdiction and allowed Judge Messina to reinstate the new trial. And I will point out that Judge Messina is now Gene Peters Baker's advisor. So she went from being the trial judge in our case, she retired and became Gene Peters Baker's advisor, but Gene won't file the motion. So we went through that last year trying to get her to file the motion. That's when ABC News picked up the case and did a story on it. And she just flat out refuses to file it. Well, we have a state habeas pending right now in front of the Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, and it pretty well explains why Gene won't file the motion. The prosecutor's office did something so egregious, I can find no other case like it. You know, when they found out, back when they investigated my father, they found out that my parents were doing well. They had substantial land holdings in Arkansas. They were about ready to retire at 45 years old. They were doing very well. Well, the prosecutor sends the family to his father's law firm, who files a wrongful death civil suit against my father, never discloses that to the defense, and he also freezes my father's assets.
Wow.
How would any of us today, if this found ourselves in this situation, how would you pay for a defense when the prosecutors have froze your assets. The U.S. Supreme Court in 2016 said you can't. That is automatic reversal of your case if they freeze your untainted assets. My father's assets were hard-earned his whole life, and they froze them. And it's automatic reversal of the case. And the bad thing is, Jean Peters Baker knows this because she cited this very case in another case that she had. She knows freezing assets is a violation of your constitutional rights. And she has an obligation to step up and do justice and file a motion for my father, and she's refusing. So now we have resorted to a state habeas, and the Attorney General, it's my hope that Andrew Bailey himself will pick this up and look at it, because it's just incredible what's happened to my father.
It is. What do you want to see out of the Attorney General's office?
Well, for the past 25 plus years, whether it's Democrat or Republican attorney generals, they have fought every conviction that's come across their desk, and many of them were overturned. I can go on and on. You got Kevin Strickland, Ricky Kidd, Keith Carnes, just
and
on
Kevin
and
Strickland
on.
is the one, the most recent one that people are going to remember, the guy who was released after a wrongful murder conviction. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that's the law that should be used in my father's case, but is not being used. So we have filed a state habeas petition in Cameron, where my father's being held, that the Attorney General has to answer. And my father's state habeas is primarily on the Sixth Amendment violation that occurred in his case when the U.S. Supreme Court in 2016 said that it was illegal for a prosecutor to freeze your untainted assets prior to trial because it violated your right to hire the attorney of choice that you could afford to hire.
And you guys obviously had a terrible attorney.
Oh, yeah, terrible attorney. He was disbarred a year after my father's conviction, and he was found to be ineffective in 3 other murder cases he was handling at the same time. And Judge Messina found that he was ineffective. So, yes, we went through that process with Jean. She won't file it, so now we're in front of the Attorney General's office, and
Can he overturn all this? I mean, can he do this single-handedly, or what can he do exactly?
Yes, the Attorney General, if you remember in the Kevin Strickland case, Jean Peters Baker was very critical of the Attorney General for not conceding to Kevin Strickland's new trial. She even said he took an oath just like she did to seek justice, which is true. The Attorney General's job, prosecutors' jobs, are not to just seek convictions. It's to seek justice and see that justice is done. And sometimes that includes recognizing a wrongful conviction. And she really chastised the Attorney General's office for not conceding in the Kevin Strickland's case. Well, fast forward now to today, when the Attorney General concedes in the DeValcanier case, she says that he's trying to be a judge and he shouldn't be doing that. Well, why did his oath of office change is my question. If he had an oath to seek justice for Kevin Strickland, he had an oath to seek justice if he felt for the DeValcanier case. And he also has an oath to seek justice for Ken Middleton, a proven wrongfully convicted 79-year-old man who is set in prison for now 20 years after having his conviction overturned. That's something DeValcanier's case does not have. That's something Strickland's case did not have. My father has already proven he was wrongfully convicted almost 20 years ago.
And it's amazing because this obviously is in no way political. They're on different political ends of the spectrum. You've got issues with both of them. Essentially, it sounds like being hypocritical in their duties for different reasons. Exactly.
The Attorney General hasn't answered our our state habeas petition yet. He has until January 12th if they don't ask for a third extension. They've already asked for 2.
So he's got till really next week.
Yes, next Friday.
So he can have this. He can have an answer to you by next Friday.
Yes, should. He's required by the judge to do that. So it's my hope that one of his assistants doesn't just pick this up and fight it, because that's what they always do. It's my hope that Andrew Bailey himself will look at the petition. My petition, our petition for my father, stands on its own.
Yeah.
It's a very strong case.
I don't know what the motivation would be to not.
Well, the motivation to not do it is what has happened to my father. It reflects very poorly on the justice system in Missouri. The police destroyed gunshot residue of my stepmother's left hand, which would have proven that she fired the gun. And we have documentation of that. A green document is altered out with white out. That's one thing. The second thing is when a prosecutor's office ties up your assets and prevents you from defending yourself and sends the family to his father's law firm, who eventually wins a $1.35 million judgment against my father, that is corruption. I can't say it any other way. That is corruption. And now in 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court agrees and says that is automatic reversal of your conviction. If they freeze your assets prior to trial and prevent you from hiring the attorney of your choice that you could afford to hire, then it's automatic reversal. And we were stuck with an attorney who was disbarred a year after my dad's case for tax evasion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Cliff Middleton, this is a powerful story. You've got a website there. I see you got a hat in the studio. It says Son Crusades for Father's Freedom. It's free-kenmiddleton.com. We suggest and recommend people to go to that site. Here in the last 30 seconds, what else do you want to make sure that people know? How can they be a part of this movement if they want to?
Well, I would just like people to know how broken our justice system is, and look at my website. And if you would, I would appreciate it if you call Andrew Bailey's office at 573-751-3321 and ask him to personally look at this case. I really feel if he looks at it, he will do the right thing.
Well, Cliff, we appreciate you coming in, sir. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Pete.